Welcome to the True Connections Recovery Podcast. I'm Brigham Elton. I am a pornography and sexual addiction counselor. We are going to help others to overcome pornography use, sexual abuse, and sexual fear by chasing healthy sexuality and being aware of the messages that are being sent to us sexually all around us. At times, these topics are hard to talk about, but our goal is to promote conversation and to help individuals feel understood and to help you feel like you're not alone. I'm so grateful you've chosen to be with us today. Converse with me, assessing your values, sexual relationships. Again, the purpose of these Converse with me things like these podcasts is to get you to think, like, what do you think about these answers? Like, I'm not saying that everything that I believe is correct for you and your family, but it is a place for you to start and consider, like, okay, like, do I agree with this? What do we think? How can I assess and then implement my values into our home? The first question that we hit here in this exploring sexual intimacy is, what qualities do you think should be present in a relationship before any level of true sexual intimacy occurs? For example, manual sex, oral sex, etc. There's a bunch of different qualities I think should be present in that relationship. Like, one is that both partners know how to get consent and are verbally conversing about sex. Like, if they're going to be sexual, I think it's important that they talk about sex as a partnership. I also think it's important that there is some parent awareness of the relationship. If the kids are living in that home, if they're living in the parent's home, I think it's nice for the parents to know about the relationship. I also think that it's important that they both understand the risks of sex, right? But as we talk more about the relationship, a big thing for me is that both partners feel safe. And that, I think, enables consent to be real, right? When people feel safe, they really have the ability to choose to participate or not. And I think that level of safety is very important. The next question: how do you think sex contributes to intimacy in a relationship and vice versa? Honestly, I really like comparing sexual intimacy with emotional intimacy. Just like emotional intimacy helps someone feel close, loved, confident, wanted, I think sexual intimacy does the exact same thing. Helps someone feel close, my opinions, who I am matters, just like my values matter for emotional intimacy. And I think that being sexual with each other really does increase that intimacy. Sex can be an awesome cherry on top of a great relationship, but it also can be a phenomenal Band-Aid for when your relationship may be a little bit on the rocks. I also think that intimacy really does contribute to sex itself, right? When someone is feeling close and safe with someone, it's a lot easier, especially for a female, to engage sexually. It also helps someone to question less themselves and not go oh my goodness, am I doing this right? And just be with each other. And I think that intimacy really does fuel healthy sexual experiences. One thing that I've noticed is that your sexual intimacy really will reflect your relationship. And as your relationship is on a positive momentum flow, your sexual intimacy will really follow that progression. And I think that's important for our children to know, right? That your sex, sexual success isn't just am I fit? Am I using the body in the correct way? That kind of stuff. I think there are some really false sexual expectations that are set around us. But real healthy sex really gets fueled, and sexual positive experiences get fueled by intimacy. Next, would you be able to accept your child's decision to become sexually intimate, even if you don't agree with it? Man, I hope so. Right. I think accepting my child isn't the exact same as accepting the decision. Of course I can't change it. My child is a chooser and gets to choose for themselves the behavior that they're going to partake in, right? But I want my child to feel accepted and loved, and that I believe in their ability to choose a partnership, I do want to communicate them the fear that I have for them if they're being sexually intimate in a relationship I don't agree with, but I want them to know that, like, hey, like, I'm here for you and I support you, and, like, I believe in you as a chooser, right? Like, I believe that you can figure it out. I know this is a really hard spot, just because, like, I know the emotional and mental and physical consequences of sexual intimacy. And so it's hard to have a child who may be seeing that as, like, something that just can be thrown around. And I want to acknowledge the emotional difficulty of that acceptance. But I also think that can be communicated, right? Like, you can communicate, like, hey, this is hard for me, but I want you to know that, like, I'm here for you, I love you, like, it's not going to change my investment in you as a human. Do you have any negative feelings regarding your own sexual history or the age you chose to become intimate for the first time? When I think about this, like, sexual history question, like, considering my own sexual history, like, I regret any sexual choice I made previous to being with my partner. I think that just allows space for comparison, and it makes it more of this experience versus this other experience, instead of us growing as a unit and, like, it's the best and the worst, but it's the two of us and we're figuring it out together. And I think sharing that with my children is going to be powerful, just to be like, look, like, you know what a sexual experience is, and sexual experience invite comparison and sometimes invite sexual fear. Like, all it can really do is hinder your sexual progression, in my opinion, and that's something that I really want my children to hear from me. I think as a child, like, we learn from the regrets of our parents, and I'm really impressed with parents who can express those clearly and not only, like, teach the moment, but also teach the principle behind that moment. Do you think men and women think about and experience intimacy differently? Yes, for both of those things. In fact, I think we'd go a long ways on both of them. But I'd like to start with the experience. Like, it's been shown in the arousal progression that, like, men and women get to their arousal state on different paces and have different steps. Where men go immediately to, like, arousal and then make a decision at the same time, women go through this step of, do I feel safe? Do I feel safe in this relationship? Do I feel safe with this person? Do I feel safe in this location? Is it clean? Is the door locked? Like, all of that stuff. Then they hit their decision phase. Then they get to arousal. And if they can stay in arousal long enough, can get to that state of arousal. And so men and women experience their arousal progression very differently and on very different paces. And then, of course, like, each person, according to the way that they think about sex, has a different sexual experience. I think this think about sex is tied to that, right? Where men have this kind of hairline trigger, women's trigger takes a little bit longer for them to get to this sexual mindset. And I think because of that, like, we are almost taught to think about sex differently. I think one thing that I see currently is that women are being celebrated for thinking about sex like men. And I think that women are subconsciously shifting to think about sex more in that way because that's what they think men want, and then they are kind of chameleon into that phase. I really believe that, like, as a psychology lane, like, we really have shifted to this seeing sex through a women's lens, and I really believe that that's helped us to see sex in a more healthy light. I think it was dangerous back in the day when all the psychologists that were studying about sexual arousal and intimacy were all males, and so they were looking at sex through their own lens. And I think as more women have gotten into that field, like, our view of sex has really broadened, and our view of sex has actually become more healthy. And so, yes, I do think it's different. And I think it's important that our kids understand both about how men experience sex and for women, because I know when I, like, started to really understand how women experience sex, I became a much better participant in that sexual progression instead of just being, like, waiting, being able to, like, go through that progression with her and seeing that as part of a sexual experience. What non-sexual acts do you think can create and build intimacy? So many emotional and recreational and mental things can build intimacy and closeness. But I think with non-sexual right here, I want to focus on, like, physical intimacy. I think that physical intimacy plays a huge part in intimacy and preparatory for sexual intimacy. And it's something that I think needs a little bit of lean from couples who've been married for an extended period of time, to make that effort to reach out, touch your partner, like be close to your partner, even if it's maybe not as comfortable for you as it would be maybe sitting by yourself on the other side of the couch, like sitting next to your partner, touching your partner, that assurance that like, hey, we're in this together. One thing that I really notice with animals, and I love watching like animal documentaries and trying to learn what our bodies and especially our animal brains need, is touch. Like there is such a focus on touch. And I want that to be part of my home. Of like there is touch in our home. We are comforting, we are showing love, we are showing safety, and like I'm invested in you via our touch. And so I want to make an effort to like, again, use my hands and touch, and hold hands and cuddle and hug and kiss and all that kind of stuff, but more often than not just like be near, right? And I think that being close to someone helps them to feel like, hey, I'm with you. The next section is called exploring sexual risks. What are the emotional risks that come with a sexual relationship? How do these differ from the risks in a non-sexual relationship? When you've shared that level of self with another human, there is this emotional bond. Like, sex is emotionally risky because it's emotionally bonding. Similar to if you tell a deep personal story about your life, it is bonding. And that bond can lead to emotional pain if that bond gets broken. Right? When we sexually invest in someone, our emotional investment is high. And if that bond doesn't work out, it can really lead to us questioning self and reevaluating, like, who am I? And am I smart? Am I tall? Was I not enough for this person? Am I sexually different? Like, all of those kind of questions can come and can really put us in risk of a negative self-definement. And so I think in that relationship, if that relationship breaks, I think there's some damage that can be done there. Also, like, that sexual connection is so deep and powerful that in a sexual relationship, like, I think that investment and that person being part of you is now larger. And when that person does whatever they do, that can affect us in a deeper way. Like, there is no human who can make me more happy and proud of myself and confident than my wife. There is also no human who can make me more miserable, sad, and lacking of self-confidence than my wife, because she is a huge part of me, and sex has really enabled that bonding. And then that bonding then carries that risk, because I'm giving a piece of myself to this other person with their own choice. What are the physical risks? Like, obviously there's the physical risks of pregnancy, which is not always a risk. I think we always put that as a risk, and sometimes that's a phenomenal reward. There are also like STDs and STIs. The one thing that I want to communicate clearly to my kids is the percentage of STDs that can be passed via anal sex, 100, oral sex, like 85, manual sex, like 60, vaginal sex, like 100. That, like, just so they understand that, like, sexual risk starts with any sexual activity, not just penetrative sex, right? There's like something called soaking that's here in Utah that's going on, and especially in Provo has the history for it. But like, just because you aren't ejaculating inside of a woman's vagina doesn't mean that you aren't taking on sexual risk. You know. The next question: what are your major fears concerning your child's sex life? My number one fear with my child's future sex life is they won't feel confident enough that they can choose whether to be sexual or not. I want my child to have confidence in their ability to choose. And I'm afraid that one day my child might feel like they have to or they should. And so then they'll be sexual when they aren't really ready to choose sexual intimacy. Some other fears that I have is like heartbreak and how sad that can be. I also have fears, especially because I have 3 daughters, that like this will be done to get attention, and that something that means so much can be used for such a fleeting moment. I have fears of pregnancy before they're ready. I have fears that my child will not be able to get pregnant. I have fears that my child will fear sex. I have fears that my child will fear me and will hide their sexual choices from me. What risk do you think is involved with sexual acts such as oral or anal sex? How do these differ from the risks of intercourse? The only real difference is like the risk of pregnancy decreases. But besides that, like all those same risks still exist, whether it's emotional or physical with like STDs and STIs. There is still quite a bit of risk. What outside factors do you think can increase sexual risk? It lists some here: alcohol, drugs, like peer pressure, lack of like how to use contraception, lack of knowledge. I think like location can increase sexual risk, like where you're choosing to be sexually active. I think age and like how developed your brain is can increase the risks of sexual risks. I think like who you choose as a partner really increases your sexual risks, and like, do they respect you as a chooser? Like, I think that's the big thing, you know, like, are they going to give you the space to choose for yourself, to be sexually engaged in what sexual acts you choose to engage in? What information do you want your child to know about contraception? I hope my child knows like the effects of hormonal contraception. I hope my female children know, plus my male children know, like how hormonal contraception affects humans and the way that they think about themselves, the way they think about the world. I also hope they know how to effectively use barrier contraceptions like condoms. I hope they know like this is the proper way to use it. This is like how you put it on. This is how it works properly. And I hope they have an effective knowledge of how they use contraception. So all information, honestly, like most to all. How much do you value abstinence? Do you think this is a realistic goal for teens? I do value abstinences because I think it allows for, again, less comparison in a partnership. I do think it's a realistic goal, but it's a goal, not a requirement. Like, if my child chooses not to be abstinent, that's their choice, and I support them, and I believe in them. There will be rules about it happening in my home, but I understand my level of control, and I think it's emotionally unhealthy if I try to own the choice of my child. It is their choice, and they get to choose when they are going to be sexually intimate. What is your motivation for encouraging your child to stay abstinent? Religious, yes. Moral beliefs, yes. Health concerns, yes. Emotional concerns, yes. I think that it is the path to a lot of sexual success. Now, it's not the only path to sexual success. Like, there is a path that has loads of failure that still can end up at sexual success, but it is, to me, the most comfortable path to sexual success. Again, not a requirement, but is something that I value. What guidelines will you try to set regarding your child's sexual activity? For example, don't have sex until you're married, until you're out of the house, until you're adult, etc. I want my child to be informed and then to be a chooser, and they get to be the ones to make the decision of what they're going to choose to do and be sexually. Now, there are certain places that need to be safe, like my home, and so there will be certain sexual rules surrounding my home, and I want them, though, to believe that I believe in them. Like, I believe in their ability to choose, and like they can do it. The goal, in my opinion, is to become a phenomenal human. And just because you may make sexual mistakes when you're young doesn't keep you from that growth long term. And I think that growth mindset is going to be important in our home. Do you support giving condoms and or contraceptives to teenagers? How do you feel about telling your child where you can find these things if he decides to have sex? Yeah, I'm totally comfortable giving those, or telling them where they are. Like, that is a thing that I want my child to have, and I don't want them to feel like they have to hide it from me or that it's a bad thing for them to use the contraception. And so I will not only make it available, but like help them understand how to get them. I think when I introduce that to my child might be a natural follow-up question to that. Like, I am hoping that I'm engaged enough to know about my child's relationships. And I would explain to them, like, look, these are condoms. This is where you buy them in a store. Like, I just am not going to be secretive about, like, my purchasing of condoms. And I think that naturally will then teach a child, like, this is how you could get them if you needed them, right? And I mean, if a child couldn't afford them, then yeah, I would help provide them. But otherwise, I think that, like, hey, you can earn enough money to buy a condom. They're pretty cheap. Do you think it's important to talk to your child about safer sex practices as they apply to other forms of intercourse, such as oral sex and anal sex? Why or why not? Yes, of course. Right? Like, the goal is to help your child be informed. If they're not informed, then how can they be a phenomenal chooser? And so the more information I can give to my child, the better. I want to talk about, like, the consequence, emotional and physical, of oral and anal sex, and so that my child knows that, like, this is how I can mitigate risk, right? There is no such thing as safe sex. It doesn't exist. The question is, what sex is safe enough for you? Like, even sex in my relationship has emotional and physical risk, and that's part of it, and the bonding is worth the risk. And so the question is my child ready to, like, bond in that way, and is that risk worth the bond? How important do you think it is to talk about a plan for sexual protection with a partner before you make a decision to have sex? I think that's a part of consent. I think it's important, like, even in my own relationship, like, we're talking about what role does protection play at this point in our life? Are we ready for another child? Like, those kind of things, you know? And so I think that to me, is going to be a taught requirement for sex. Now, my child obviously gets to choose, but the guidance they're going to receive from me is that, like, this is a conversation that needs to happen before sexual activity, where you guys have decided, like, how you're going to approach contraception, how are you going to handle that moment. And it allows sex to be planned, which I think sex is more healthy when it is planned in a young relationship. And I think that when they okay, we know this is coming, this is our plan to do it, I think that then enables future success and enables consent. And instead of being a moment decision, it's like a thought about long-term decision. So I'm really going to encourage my children to talk about this topic before being sexually active. How much were you impacted by peer pressure as a child? Did it ever lead you to take sexual steps that you later regretted? I never really took sexual steps that I later regretted. Peer pressure, not unspoken peer pressure, affected me the most. Like, I wanted people to think I was awesome. And so I would do things maybe a little out of character to, like, get other people to think that I'm awesome, or I would embezzle a story to get other people to think that I was cool, or that I was smart, or that I was confident, or whatever, right? And I think that it messed with my self-definement more than it actually messed with my sexual decisions. And that's something I'm really going to look for. Now, this is a very natural stage to go through, is where our perceived, whatever we think our peers think of us, becomes self-defining. But I hope to help my child get beyond that quickly, to be able to make independent choice of who they want to be. What do you think are valid reasons to enter into a sexual relationship? How can you encourage your child to reflect on this? I think some valid reasons to enter in a sexual relationship is because you have chosen that person as a partner. And that partnership can be enabled by sexual connection. I think you've chosen that person to be your partner and to build a family with is also a great reason to enter into a sexual relationship. I think because you're invested in that human and you're invested in the entity of us is a great reason to engage in a sexual relationship. Now, I can encourage my child to reflect this by talking about it and talking about what sex is to me and what sex can be. And as I'm open about how powerful it is, I hope that my child can feel that power and then make choices accordingly. Have you ever set sexual goals for yourself or for your relationship? Do you think it would be beneficial for your child to do this? Yes, absolutely. I set sexual goals. I set goals about the way that I want to think about sex. I set goals about how I want to sexually think and treat my partner. I have goals about my sexual engagement and the way that I think about sex, whether it's in a positive or in a more of a, like, fear-based mindset. I wanted to overcome that fear. I think it's beneficial for my child to set sexual goals, because what's hard is making a decision in a moment, and setting a vision or a goal enables you to, in a moment of clarity, set standards for yourself and make decisions that may be hard in the moment, where it may be more clouded by, like, peer pressure or by relationship pressure or even by, like, sexual pressure from your own body. I think those goals enable that future progression. One of my other goals is to, when I see something sexual, for it to not have the pull that pornography once had on me. Right? And I manage that by choosing to think about sex in a healthy way consistently. How open do you want your conversations with your child to be when it comes to sexual decision? Would you want her to come to you with questions or concerns, or would you rather talk to someone else, such as a trusted family friend or an older sibling? I hope that conversation's with me, but I support it being with someone else. I understand that that's hard for a child to talk with a parent, but I really hope to be the kind of parent that helps that child understand that, hey, I believe in you, I trust you, and though we will fall, I believe in your ability to get up and try again. Like, it's your life, and I'm here to support you and hopefully get you off on the best foot possible, but I'm not the decider of your life. You are, and I trust your ability to choose. Right? Now, of course, the leash, I guess you might call it, that I give my child will increase with age, but I think it will increase at a faster pace than I think most people would guess. I believe in my child's ability to choose, and I think as I support her in that choice, or him in that choice, that it enables our relationship to grow and blossom, and enables me to be there when times are hard, not because I'm looking down, but because I'm with you, and I believe in you. Again, the purpose of these Converse With Me podcasts is to think about these values for yourself and how they can show up in your home, right? And I think sometimes it's hard to have someone to have these conversations with, and I guess virtually I wanted you to have this conversation with me and to hear my beliefs, and whether you agree or disagree, awesome. Choose for yourself and set values for yourself, and those values may become more concrete over time, but they may be quite liquid, and that's okay. You have space to figure out the human that you want to be sexually. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Please share. This really helps us to succeed as a community as you share information like this. And if you ever feel like you could use some individual help, please set up a free consultation. You can visit us at our website at trueconnectionsrecovery.com and set up a free consultation there. Thank you.